A very entertaining, a surprisingly entertaining Thursday night game for us to recap here on the Athletic Football Show. I'm Robert Mays, joined by my co-host Derrik Klassen. What'd you think of that, man?
I mean, it's not the game I thought we were going to get. If you like going into this, I thought this Bills team on a short week against that Dolphins team, what they've been done the first couple of weeks, and I should have known better, right? Like on paper, that's how that matchup should go, and maybe on noon on a Sunday, that's how that game goes. But Thursday nights, it's the short week hits everybody, and I think we saw neither defense really was up for the challenge. I think for a lot of parts of this game.
An absolutely bizarre game on like so many different fronts. When the Bills scored to go up 21-14 in the third quarter, at that point in the game, they had a 67% offensive success rate, according to Next Gen, and they almost lost the game. When I say almost lost, it was very close into the fourth quarter for reasons that are still a little bit unclear. If Zach Sealer does not get that roughing the kicker penalty, the Dolphins get the ball back with a chance to take the lead in the second half of that game, despite the fact that the Bills were marching the ball up and down the field at will for a vast majority of the first three quarters. So there are so many different ways we could go here, but that was too close to being an excruciating loss for the Bills for me to feel comfortable right now if I am a Buffalo Bills fan.
Yeah, and like I think the most frustrating part of that to me is like I watched the way that the Dolphins were trying to play, and I think the first drive looked really good. And you can even maybe say the first couple of drives, specifically with the run game. Like I thought they did a really good job of really stretching this defense horizontally, both with all the motion stuff that they were doing, which that's always been a staple of this offense, but they were doing a lot of stuff where they were creating like 3-man, 4-man fronts with like two tight ends or getting a tight wide receiver. So you just have these wide face of the line of scrimmage and they're running the ball that way. But otherwise, like I was just super unimpressed with what Miami was doing. And then it still just continued to work. Like some of the passing game stuff was really frustrating for me. I know at one point, I think in the first half, the Dolphins were 8 of 10 on third downs and multiple like 10+ yard conversions, which is not really
10
a
of 15
staple.
in the game.
And that's like not a staple of what the Dolphins do, like converting
No.
third and longs. Like that's never when Tua is your quarterback and you have, some of the skill players that they have, like that's just not how it's usually gone for them. But you have Tua making the one play where he scrambles out to his left a little bit and kind of whips back across the field. That was one of the best plays he's ever made outside of the pocket. And then the Tyreek Hill where he catches it like, 4 yards short of the sticks and just wheels back to the middle of the field is just like, this Bills defense can't allow that stuff to happen if they want to be a serious contender. It was a bizarre game.
It was a bizarre game. The 10 of 15 on third down is one of the several bizarre stats that we'll throw out here over the next 20 or so minutes. That's how you keep a game close when you have this level of talent disparity and just the overall quality of these teams. The Dolphins were 10 of 15 on third down. Those two plays you mentioned at the end of the half are unbelievably frustrating plays for the Bills. And then one of the third downs they didn't technically get is the lateral play where they set up the fourth and short in order to get that. So even that 10 of 15 is misleading for how efficient and productive the Dolphins were on third down over the course of this game.
And again, like that's why the game is weird, because that's just not how the Dolphins have ever won. That's how the Bills can win games sometimes, is they end up in weird first and down scenarios, end up in a bunch of third and longs, and Josh Allen just does the thing. But if you were to tell me going into a game that the Dolphins offense would be a little bit slow, maybe throwing way too many short passes and end up in all these third and longs, like I would be like, there's no way they can win a game. And they, again, if not for maybe a Zach Sealer mistake, like they would have had a really good chance at this.
At one point in the second half, Tua was averaging 45.5%, not averaging, but 45.5% of his attempts in the game, according to Next Gen, had come behind the line of scrimmage.
How many swing passes do you think he threw? I don't have the number on it, but I would have guessed almost a dozen.
I can't even count them all. And it got to a point where we was that deep into the game where I was going like into Next Gen history. And I was like, what is the record for the percentage of your passes behind the line of scrimmage in the last 10 years for guys who throw like 20 passes in a game? It's like 48%. And so he was creeping up near the top 10 over the course of the day. And it was just an extremely, I mean, we talk about dishonorable offense. This was one of the least honorable offensive performances I can remember, but the Bills couldn't make them pay for it, because this is a thing we've come back to with this Bills team over and over and over again. On the second and third level, they can struggle to tackle and make plays in space. And that kept creeping up in this game. And the two things about the Bills defense coming into the season where I was like, okay, I'd be worried about this if I were a Buffalo Bills fan hoping to win the Super Bowl. the number 2 outside cornerback spot. Trey White, God bless him. We are deep into this with Trey White. Trey White was released by a team last year and then was getting spot duty for the Ravens. He's now a starter for a Super Bowl team and the second and third level tackling in space. Both of those things reared their ugly head tonight in a way that I think I'd be a little bit worried about it if I were somebody who rooted for this team, because this is not, you can easily say it's week 3, it's a Thursday night game, whatever. This is a team with like the ultimate aspirations, right? And so these little tiny cracks, even if they might seem insignificant this early in the season, I think it's important to just log those when we consider where this team wants to eventually get.
No, I think that stuff was huge. Again, the second and third level tackling was as bad as it was for most of that Ravens game. That was a big one. And then even again, some of those big, like the third down conversions or just the longer chunk plays that they were getting, it was again, like you were saying, like they just, like I remember one specifically, they had Jalen Waddle just race across the face of the line of scrimmage against Trey White. And Trey White at this stage in his career just doesn't have, even at his best, like that's not what Trey White really did, was run across the field with the guy. Yeah. And so for him to try to do it at this
he's not
stage,
at his
like,
best anymore. Again,
no.
All the credit to Trey White, who's had an amazing career, but I think that's something that would worry me. And then he missed the sack on Tua, who had him dead to rights coming off the edge on that third down where Tua makes the play out of structure. And so some frustrating moments for the Bills defense. They eventually cap it off because Tua throws a heinous interception. That was like that is a heinous interception. Everything about it, because you watch that play unfold and the back is lined up to the right. So the back is the number 3 receiver to that side. Terrell Bernard is relating to the back as he's moving to the flat. So not only are Tua's eyes taking Terrell Bernard to the ball, he was already heading that direction, and Tua just does not account for him. Like, there are a lot of interceptions we see every single week, every single Sunday, where it's like, I can understand how that happens. That is one on multiple different levels. Even if he has Deion Walker in his face and he has to worry about that right away, that I just don't think you can explain away.
And the Bills it wasn't one of those, again, kind of like you were saying, where maybe they threw a funky blitz and did something weird and caught the quarterback. They were just playing rotation cover 3 to the other side. Like they spun the safety down to the field and Bernard was over there into the boundary. And so, all right, if we're going to move the safety into the weak hook, then the linebacker has to push over to the strong hook. And that's exactly what he was doing. And he just flies right in front of the face of the receiver and just picks that one off. Like that is a mistake that, again, you can't really make that if you were a team that your whole identity is that you're going to be this really efficient, explosive passing offense and have it when you need it. And then you do something like that when you absolutely need it.
What do you make of this approach offensively? Because we were creeping toward this last year with the way that they were trying to throw the ball. You think about all the targets we had for HN, how prominent Jonnu Smith was within the offense. So there's part of me, if I'm trying to give them a tiny bit of grace and saying, the offensive line is an abject disaster right now. You've got Larry Borum, and now at one point Daniel Brunskill was in there, and that is a group that you have to account for. And Tua was pressured at a decent clip, and I think it was like 33% of dropbacks, so it wasn't anything crazy. But I can understand wanting to lean into this style a little bit more just to get the ball out of his hands if you worry about your ability to hold up. But I also think there's a little bit more to it than that. And so I don't know how hard to come down on them for, again, what we were watching, which is a very dishonorable way of playing NFL football.
I think what's fascinating to me is obviously when this offense was humming in 2022, even as far as 2023, it was all the, 12 to 18 yard middle of the field routes that they were throwing. And that is just not the offense anymore. And again, every offense is going to have to change at some point, but it has really become this, like you said, throwing a lot of screens, swing passes, doing stuff like that, throwing a lot of speed outs and stuff like that. And I get that, but with Tua's arm strength, you can't scale that up the field the way that they could with the middle of the field stuff, where you could just anticipate windows and throw it there. I don't think Tua really has the arm strength to challenge those like 15-yard outs. I mean, there was one on, I think it was like a 2nd or 3rd and 8 later in the game where he just completely misses Tyreek Hill, and he's a little late on it because of pressure again. But the better quarterbacks have the arm strength to fit that throw anyway, and he just didn't have it.
He has time to reset on that play.
Yes,
this idea that he was like pushed off of his spot, you have to be able as an NFL quarterback. It's not even like the pressure was in his face. He had to slide a little bit and then reset to make that throw, and he still couldn't do it. And we've had this conversation about the Dolphins a lot over the last 2 or 3 years. And I've actually been complimentary of them sometimes when we framed it this way, where I'm like, I actually appreciate the fact that they can keep going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole and come away with answers that actually work. And last year, to me, was a perfect example of like them just doing this weird shit that somehow is continuing to work. I almost feel like we're a little bit too far down the rabbit hole now, where they've dug themselves so deep into this hyper specific way that they play, and there's kind of no coming out of it. And that was always the danger as they tried to make this work with Tua. And I kind of feel like, in similar to a lot of other aspects of where the Miami Dolphins are right now, that plan offensively has run out of road a little bit.
I think it's definitely run out of road. And like, I think part of our complaints in previous versions have been like, oh, well, they can't run the ball and they need to learn how to do that. And they ran the ball well in this game, but like Ed Oliver was not playing in this game. And who was the one shining light in that Ravens game in terms of run defense and getting in the backfield? It was Ed Oliver. And so I feel like if he was in the game, this is probably a little bit different. Like that first drive where they just get mashed for most of it up and down the field probably does not happen the same way if Ed Oliver is playing in this game. And so I don't know. This to me was just like, if they're going to be an offense where the only way that they can attack downfield, like really their biggest play was, or their biggest attempt at a shot play was that one that Tua kind of heaves the ball to Tyreek Hill on like a 3rd and 11. And that was really their only like, let's get aggressive and do something play.
And the sheer desperation that was wafting off of that play, I don't think anybody enjoyed. So we're having this conversation about the dishonorability of the Dolphins offense. What do you think Josh Allen's average air yards per target was in this game today?
I don't know, but I know it was very low because he was throwing a lot of like, I'm just going to throw in between that little area between the hook and the flat defender, and we're just going to get 4 yards here and move on.
3.2.
Wow.
3.2 air yards per target for Josh Allen in this game. And again, I don't think that's necessarily, that's not just a bad thing, like out and out every single time if you're going to throw the ball underneath the entire game. But that was their approach the entire game. And then in the second half, when they were facing a couple disadvantageous down and distance situations on those first couple drives where they eventually had to punt, they had unsuccessful runs on first down, incomplete passes on second down. Then they were facing 3rd and longs, and they just didn't really seem to have answers in those scenarios. You know, the only real time they were behind the sticks in this game and it worked out was that 1st and 20 that they faced, and Josh Allen had that 19-yard scramble. Other than that, whenever they were behind the sticks, they seemed to struggle. And so it's probably just a one-off thing, but I might pay a little bit of attention to that just based on how designery a lot of the passing game kind of needs to be based on the personnel that they have, right? Like that fake stock block shot play to Dalton Kincaid off of a screen, that's really cool on 1st and 10. But when you put yourself a little bit behind the sticks, you're really requiring Josh Allen to do a ton of heavy lifting. And that's just something I probably keep in the back of my mind again when we get into higher leverage moments deeper into the season.
I agree. And again, because some of it is like Thursday night football short week, maybe I'll give them a little bit of grace for that. But this is not a good Dolphins secondary. Like these receivers should have. This
seems to be the team, right?
Yes.
This seems to be the team where you could tap into this. And the other part of it, the number that's crazy, Josh Allen was pressured on 8.8% of his dropbacks in this game.
So that's
so the grace that we showed to the Dolphins for not doing it does not apply to the Buffalo Bills in this case.
Right. And so that was actually going to be like my, in a way, a silver lining is like, if there's anything about this Miami team that I'm actually okay with, it's like the front can get after you a little bit, or at least in theory, like they have some of the guys to do it. And like Josh Allen was extremely protected in this game. And I would even wager some of those pressures were probably just like, he was holding on to the ball for a while because he was afforded the ability to do that. Like they were just never really getting up on him. And it's a little bit troublesome that he just didn't feel comfortable triggering on anything down the field, despite how, comfy he was back there for most of the game.
40.6% blitz rate for the Dolphins per next gen, 9.4% pressure rate. I'm so sorry for
give him that extra 0.5%
on the pressure rate. So yeah, definitely some Thursday night weirdness, like 9.4% pressure rate, 3.2 air yards per target for Josh Allen, Tua throwing 45% of his passes behind the line of scrimmage. Like this was a weird game on a bunch of different fronts, and the Dolphins kept it much closer than they probably should have, mostly driven by that, again, another weird stat, 10 of 15 on 3rd down. I don't really know how much time we need to spend on like big picture takeaways with this team. We've done a lot of that with Miami. We did a lot of that coming into the season, and nothing I said in June, July, or August doesn't apply to what's going on right now. Like, this always felt this season like kind of an empty gesture for the Dolphins before they had to do some real soul searching, either at the end of the year or maybe quicker than that, if we get to it a little bit faster, if this continues at this trajectory. And I don't really think anything differently than I did back then.
I don't either. I think we were both pretty, not very optimistic about how the way that this was going to go. I just think now it's like, now we know. Like 3 weeks into into the season, you're 0-3. The offense does not look the way that it was supposed to. Because I think even if we were a little bit more pessimistic, you could at least still kind of see the case of like, okay, when Tua's healthy and they have these guys on offense, usually it works really well. Maybe the offensive line and run game will be better, and maybe the pass rush is enough for the defense to be fine. And we're 3 weeks into the season, and none of that has really been true to this point. And so I think now that we have 3 weeks worth of data, like it would be one of the most shocking things I've ever seen if this Dolphins team can dig themselves out of the hole that they put themselves in.
And I don't know if they'll be the worst team in the league over the course of the year. I think the offensive coaching staff and some of the skill position talent might be too good for them to just be terrible all season. And the broadcast on Amazon flipped up their schedule over the next month. They do have a pretty favorable schedule moving forward over the next 4 or so games. But I just think even if they're competent, the question I always come back to is to what end? Like, what does it matter? Like, even if you can crawl yourself out of a hole and go 7-10, like, what are we actually doing with this team? And the one question we haven't really talked about when it comes to the near term and midterm future of the Miami Dolphins is what happens with Tua. Because I think part of the argument for why they've decided to hang on to Mike McDaniel, and I think there's some validity to this argument, is this is the best case scenario for our quarterback. This is the guy who has shown a consistent ability to get the most out of this quarterback. I don't think that's a reason to hang on to a coach when everything else around it is crumbling, but I do think that's been part of the calculus. So if they move on from him, I just think we're going to have a really hard time getting to even remotely close to what he has been for stretches of the Mike McDaniel era. And if you look at the money right now, he is going to be the Miami Dolphins quarterback in 2026. He has a $99 million cap hit next year. I say that other teams have moved on from quarterbacks with that sort of money if you want to do it as a post June 1st, whatever. But it probably feels like this is a situation that they will not be able to move on until at least 2027. And it's a tough spot to be as a Dolphins fan, because I don't think it's too overreactionary to start thinking about that conversation.
I really don't either. Like this has been, again, he's been, I think, for a long time a quarterback I've been a little bit up and down on. And I think last year they figured some stuff out, but I still had some questions about what the offense could be. And again, if the offense is going to devolve to what it's been through 3 weeks of this season and potentially not get any better, and again, they may be in the best case scenario now go 7-10. At this point, you're looking at either, I don't know, if you want to call it a Jimmy Garoppolo situation, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield in Cleveland, like whoever you want to pull for like quarterback who looked good for a little bit in a certain system and then kind of ran out of road. I kind of think that that's where we're approaching with Miami. And I agree with you with the McDaniel point. Like it does feel like this was probably the best case scenario for Tua, because at least with guys like Goff and Baker Mayfield, where they did run out of road where they were, the arm talent was just so much different with those guys that you could at least see the vision for the future. And I think with Tua, I struggled seeing that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that with Jared, it was just some of the structural things that were going on and just like his inability to deal with a lot of environmental stuff, pressure, things like that. But there's no denying that he has a hose. If you put him in the right circumstances, he can make any throw you want him to make. That's just not the case with Tua. He's a hyper-specific player that thrived for stretches in a hyper-specific offense. And if you remove that hyper-specific offense, even if you replace it with something that's well-designed, are we going to be able to get $53 million worth of Tua? And I just have a hard time imagining what that would look like. And I'm sure that will be a conversation that we are revisiting over the next couple years as the Dolphins inevitably change out some of the major stakeholders with that organization. All right. That is all we've got for today. please, if you could, if you're watching the channel for the first time, if you're a mainstay on the channel, please like this video, please subscribe, please comment down below. Let us know what you think the Dolphins should do. Do you think it's time to move on from Tua after the season? Like, who do you think might be the right coach for Tua if they do move on from Mike McDaniel? Would love to hear from you guys. Obviously, doing a lot more stuff on YouTube this year. Very, very excited about it. Have had a blast with all of these reaction videos that we've gotten to do, and we will be continuing them throughout the season. For now, that's all we got. Sincerely appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you very soon.